All right, thank you for staying with us. Burkina-Faso, Mali, and Niger have introduced visa-free travel and residency rights for citizens of the 15-member ECOWAS bloc to strengthen the centuries-old ties among African people. Despite being low-income, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger's new visa-free policy aims to foster stronger regional ties. This decision follows the recent approval of their exit from ECOWAS. Recall that in January 2023, they accused the bloc of imposing, quote, inhumane and irresponsible sanctions following military coups, while failing to address internal security issues, end quote. Now, these strained relations followed military coups in Niger in July, Burkina Faso in 2022, and Mali in 2020. Joining us via Zoom from Senegal is a regional coordinator, Institute for Security Studies, Dakar, Senegal, Dr. Oluwole Ojewale, to speak with us on this recent development. Good morning. It's good to have you join us. Dr. Ojewale, can you hear me?
Yes, I'm hearing you. Can you hear me too?
Yes, I can hear you now. Good morning.
Good morning.
All right, let's begin this conversation with your perspective of this issue between these three countries, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, has taken, how ECOWAS is handling the matter, especially now allowing them leave the bloc, and also they're now looking at still fostering ties with the region by offering visa-free movements and also residency rights to citizens of the bloc.
Well, I think to a large extent, ECOWAS has done the best that they can, even though there was a mistake at the beginning in terms of how they approach the political solution in terms of talking about military intervention in those countries. And it is within the sovereign right of those countries to decide whether they want to be part of ECOWAS or move out of the bloc. So these development about residency permit and then visa-free entry for citizens of other members of the bloc to be able to enter Burkina Faso, or if the other two countries also deem it so, I think it's a welcome development, and it shows that they are living but not really living. And the fact that they probably realize that they really need ECOWAS cooperation and partnership. I mean, whether they now want to follow that multilaterally or bilaterally with each of the country, it's a decision that they will make in the coming days. But it's a welcome development, even though it's a sad one that they decide to exit.
So if you look at ECOWAS, I'm wondering what is going to happen, because the Sahelian region is already grappling with terrorism, weak governance, and humanitarian crisis. So will this extension help further this destabilization, especially with Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso now forming alignments with under the Liptako-Gourma Charter? So how much risk does this pose for ECOWAS unity?
Well, I wouldn't say it's a serious issue if you look at it from the economic front. But in terms of security cooperation, it is a big challenge. Based on available data, these three countries are about the global capital of terrorism now, according to the Peace Index. And then there is a lot of spillover. Littoral countries like Togo, Benin have started experiencing serious spike in attacks in the recent time, which is also a spillover from Burkina Faso, Mali to these countries. And when you look at the nature of interaction between the terrorist group, the Islamic State, the Boko Haram, and other vagaries of terrorist groups that are operating in these axes, and you situate that in the context of serious border porosity that we have in our region, it's a matter of not allowing your neighbor to be eating cockroach, because by the time the disturbance starts during the night, you might not be able to sleep. So I make that metaphorical statement to say we can't afford to leave them to themselves. And if they decide to go this way, we'll be looking at form of security partnership that the other bloc can have with these countries, or rather maybe the ECOWAS bloc, we really need to solidify border security around that region. The greatest threat that we will be facing, or that we are facing as the other countries within the region, is the spread of armed groups, terrorist groups, arms trafficking, that will be flowing or likely to be flowing from those three countries to the other countries within the bloc. So it's a serious, serious security challenge that we have at hand, considering the fact that these military-led governments have not been able to contain or curtail the spread of violent extremist groups and their attacks in the recent, and we can go on and on to be mentioning the numbers.
Well, some will agree with you that even the matter that we are facing right now, talking about the Lakurawa terrorist group, is a fallout of all of these matters that we are seeing, especially because they operate along the borders of our country with Niger and every other country there. But you spoke about something that ECOWAS cannot let them go totally. There has to be some arrangement such that we can look at how we can maintain or perhaps police our borders as it is. And I wonder if you think that will form the conversation that the president of ECOWAS, Omar Touré, will be having in this transitional period, so that we can have something concrete, even though the conversation is to see if they can stay back in ECOWAS. But should this matter that you have raised also form part of the conversation?
Two things at least will be the overarching agenda of the next 6 months from January to July, I think, which is the bench line that was set, if I'm correct, or maybe June, but I know there's 6 months. One is re-engaging on making them to stay. And that is going to involve a lot of diplomacy, high-level diplomacy, in the sense of making them to see the reason for them to stay. The second thing will be in the area of security cooperation, and then ancillary issues like maybe trade, issues of health, which is very, very important in terms of how we manage cross-border challenges, whether in health or security, trade, free movement of people and all those things. And knowing fully whether these countries also rely heavily, these are landlocked states, do not have access to the sea. So it is also possible that they will also be putting that on the table. But I think what I can see is that there will be strong efforts to make them to stay. I see the reasons to stay. And I've seen some people who have gone to the streets that maybe ECOWAS might have to change the strategy. Mahama is going to be sworn in January. He has played some fundamental roles in his first coming. Probably they will also be giving him that responsibility to talk to them. And then a whole number of other options, founding fathers that are still alive who have played critical role in the formation and then even the flourishing of ECOWAS over the years. So those critical issues will be on the table. But the major one will be one, security, and then ensuring that they convince them to stay.
I'm wondering where this leaves ECOWAS, because when you started off, you said ECOWAS has actually tried its best, to ensuring that these three nations, stay back. But critics have argued that the extension makes ECOWAS look indecisive, especially, delaying the withdrawal. They're thinking that it undermines its authority, and looking at ECOWAS position itself as a champion of democracy. Do you feel that if they don't handle this well, or with the way they tactically delaying their withdrawal, might make other nations, challenge ECOWAS authority and also follow the same routes in the future?
Well, nothing is off the table, but particularly when you look at the global realities that we are facing, we are seeing the rise of isolationism, nationalism, people decoupling, nations decoupling from multilateralism. This has been for about a decade now, particularly with the rise of populism across the world. Some governments come into power and they feel like they can go it alone. And our region is not going to be different from this. Obviously, ECOWAS made strategic mistakes, particularly in terms of gunboat diplomacy that they display at the beginning, military rhetorics and intervention and all those things. And I also showed up on this program and criticized that, like a whole number of people did across the region. And then we can't continue to eat hard on ECOWAS. At some point, they made a U-turn and then realized their mistakes and then lifted the sanction and all those things. And then these people still insisted that they were going to leave. And there's a limit to how much ECOWAS can do in that regard. So if they've so decided to leave, ECOWAS had no option other than to leave that open. So like you mentioned, there's a possibility that there could be some political development. And that is the reason why they put the clause there. It is like a free market system, freedom of entry and freedom of exit. So it is within the remit of any sovereign nation to decide that they don't want to be part of such multilateral arrangement. And then people will begin to look for ad hoc options like these three countries have done now, even though I have a very strong feeling that nothing good is going to come out of that. And I'm not talking down on the countries, but we've seen what they are able to do in the past. If Mali were to be a democracy that is running a 4-year term, the current military regime will have been subjected to election, and nothing has been delivered in those countries. And it's also a lesson for ECOWAS for and other countries within the region. The global challenges that we are facing across border, and they call for interdependence, not countries decided that they want to go alone. These are about some of the countries that are on the lowest ladder of poverty in terms of global index, about some of the poorest part of the world. So it goes to show that they need this partnership, they need this arrangement much more than we can even think maybe other countries need them at this critical hour. Like I mentioned, that they are landlocked countries that rely heavily on the littoral state. So it is within their remit to decide that they want to leave, but it is in the larger interest of the region. And I must say that this is about, ECOWAS, we have our challenges, but I can tell you, having moved around a bit, this is one of the countries with the strongest regional integration. I live in Senegal. I don't need any paper or any permit to live or work here. It is as seamless as that. So people now decided that they want to leave, and then maybe other people want to fracture a 50-year-old institution in the future. I think in the light of the present realities that we are facing generally and individually as a nation, this is not a time that any country can decide to just pull out of such multilateral arrangement.
So if I hear you correctly, do you think that ECOWAS, although they haven't decided whether to impose restrictions on people and goods from these countries, but do you think that they'll be throwing that card now that they are looking to pacify them to stay, and these countries are also looking to still maintain their ties with ECOWAS?
ECOWAS will be more benign in their approach this time around and put all incentives on the table to make sure that these people can stay. And I'm hoping that there will be some strong reason and individual voices that can actually prevail on them to stay. I think there are a whole lot of issues that have affected the reason why they want to leave. If we subject this development to intelligent conversations in those countries, I don't think they are acting in the larger interest of their people. I mean, everyday person that is trading, moving across the border, crossing over from this country to other ECOWAS countries within the region, I don't think they are going to subscribe to this idea. And then it appears some 3 guys just gathered and they are driving the country in the direction that if they hold a referendum, I'm not sure they are probably going to really get a popularity vote in terms of should we exit or stay within ECOWAS. That is if it were to be that they follow a process like the Brexit that we saw in UK. So I don't think it is a far-reaching participatory decision, but because, in the military government, it's all by decrees and people just have to comply. I think that is the reason why they've been able to go this route. And then the jury will be out at the committees. But I don't think ECOWAS is going to be on the coercive side this time around. It will continue to play the part of diplomacy, talking to them and bringing other actors on board to be able to make sure that they stay. Don't forget that these countries have civil servants within the ECOWAS. And I'm not sure whether they are paying their dues in the past few days. ECOWAS continue to retain those nationals that are working from those countries in ECOWAS. These are critical realities that even at that level, I don't think the people who are in that category are probably going to support that. And ECOWAS has infrastructure, whether it is for peace and security, even the standby force for counter-terrorism, largely is for this country. So those are critical investment and plans that ECOWAS have in terms of stabilizing these countries and ensuring that their exit will not become a fragmentation that is going to affect ECOWAS. But the big elephant in the room that we have not mentioned is the fact that the overarching agenda, why they want to leave, is because they don't want anybody to talk to them about how they are going to midwife their democratic transition, and they want to shut everybody out.
Interesting. So maybe that's the reason why we're seeing France now being kicked out, because what France is wanting out, we are seeing Russia and China deepening ties with some of these military regimes in the Sahel. But I'm wondering whether this extension will definitely give room for or provide room for these superpowers, China and Russia, to increase their influence over this region, these regimes, at the expense of ECOWAS? Or how do you think ECOWAS should react or should behave, or the bloc should behave in this geopolitical reality?
There are two things to unpack here. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu presently chairs the ECOWAS Commission, in terms of the overarching leadership. And I think there's a challenge of trust. In the recent time, France has been building some very strong relationship with the Anglophone countries. The president has been to France. I move around, I work within the Francophone countries. And what I hear within that circle is the fact that they feel Nigeria is fast becoming the proxy for France in the region. So these are issues that are affecting trust on the part of these three countries. What their public policy makers are saying, that I know what people are saying on the street, that creates a serious challenge. And I think that is the reason why Sotus suggested that Nigeria might have to change the approach and take advantage of the fresh air that is coming from Ghana to midwife the next 6-month transition. But let me talk about the second issue. The second issue is the fact that the countries that you mentioned, particularly Russia, offer these countries regime protection. That is the reason why, in spite of the rumbles of coup, particularly in Burkina-Faso and all these things, they've been able to create a nucleus that protects the presidency. And there is no any democracy, superpower democracy, that support democracy abroad, that is going to support that. Russia offers that to them on the platter of gold, and they don't want to trade it off. And I think it's part of what is also emboldening them to be able to act in this direction. Because, Russia is spreading autocracy all over the places, and they mirror what Russia offers on the continent. So I think they are, coupled with the fact that we are entering into the age of multipolarity, in which countries are free to select their partners across board. You see Turkey coming to play a role. You see UAE, Saudi, and all these countries coming to play a role. So as France is being displaced in those countries, in quotes, these are other countries, other middle power and big powers that are coming to compete with the interest in those countries. So I think it is in that context that they think they should jettison ECOWAS that can maybe erect some bulwark in terms of how they should be able to manage democratic transition. But if there's any lesson to learn, you've seen how the Assad fall in Syria, and then it shows what Russia is capable of offering, particularly having to deal with the war in Ukraine that Russia has not been able to prosecute in 2 years, as Putin promised that they were going to level that country. So the lesson that they need to learn is that I don't think Russia is a lifetime partner. Let me put it that way. They should take their lesson from Syria, how Russia abandoned Assad at the last minute. And whether they like it or not, there is a growing discontent in those countries. And if they are not going to do the right thing, there are people are the ones that are going to rise against them at some point.
Yeah, but they will still argue, sorry to butt in your line of thought, but they will still argue that Russia still granted them asylum to Assad, even though Assad did not tell his military and those who work with him that he will be leaving the country. He just left. UAE didn't help, but Russia still offered to help him to grant him asylum. So that might be another boost for the Russia's image of protecting one of their own.
Well, I think that is a short-term arrangement, because the truth of the matter is that if there is a need to bring him before the International Criminal Court, one day he can be arrested. And I don't think these people think this is the fate that should befall them on the long run. But the lesson I'm trying to draw is to say, if you take Russia to be your lifeline or lifetime partner, you can see what has befallen Assad. And then there is only a limit to how far you can go. The fellow in Burkina Faso has set 5 years transition plan after you have spent almost 2 years in power. That is not going to be. Whether people rise from, whether there are external actors that rise against this country or not, the people will revolt at some point because the discontent is growing in those countries. They are not delivering on security. They are not delivering on human welfare. And I'm not saying democracy or election necessarily guarantee that there will be improvement in the quality of life of the people. But what democracy does is that it fosters inclusion. People can be part of the decision making. They can be part of the process. And to a large extent, that helps to address grievances that can lead to multiplier effect of instability within the country, which these three countries, if they are not careful, they are driving their countries along that direction.
All right. I want to quickly take you back to something you mentioned, talking about approaching this matter differently, especially when my colleague Ibrahim talked about the influence, the foreign influence, talking about Russia and all of it as it is. And I'm wondering what kind of steps or how you see the approach that needs to be changed should be done. What should Nigeria or the leadership of ECOWAS do differently this time?
Two things. I think they need to strengthen the conversation and not foreclose anything at all. Because if they allow these guys to live as they intend to live, then 6 months from July next year, you can't talk to them about democracy any longer. The major point is to allow them to make it a win-win approach. Like the fellow in Burkina Faso that has said the 5 years, is it possible to find a midpoint of, let's say, in the next 2 years, let election hold in those countries? And then any form of arrangement that ECOWAS can provide in terms of counter-terrorism support. And there are two arguments along this direction. Some people feel they have allowed insecurity to fester in those countries. So, and I'm talking about the military administration. I'm not talking about ECOWAS. So as to use that as a pretext for not holding election. So the plan about counter-terrorism force need to be expedited as much as possible, at least to bring the wave of attack down, to whittle down the power of those extremist groups, and create a bit of safe spaces in which the electoral process can resume. That is the number one thing. The second thing, which I think is very, very important, is to stay on the path of diplomacy and remove anything that has to do with cohesive pressure, cohesive negotiation in terms of how transition is going to be fostered in those countries. Here is a bigger picture. If we allow those countries to unravel from within, that is, these dictators continue to rule forever, we might have another Libya experience at hand, because we have seen, and you can have all sorts of experiences, including the Arab Spring experience, because internal revolt is the strongest experience that we must not allow in those countries. If it happens, then you're going to have serious humanitarian concern, free flow of arms. You know, it becomes a banana republic in which anything and anything goes. And the implication of that is that the thing that we fear might now come upon us, because you're going to have refugee crises, you're going to have insecurity and all sorts of things because of instability that this is likely going to foster. And I think that is the reason why ECOWAS really need to rise up on the diplomatic plan to engage this country meaningfully in the next 6 months. And I think it's possible. And the first thing is, even though you are interested in democratic transition, but don't put that forward as the first point of agenda when engaging with them.
I'm building on your last on this response, based on the question asked by Veronica. If you look at regionalism in Africa, a book written by David J. Francis, it says African institutions succeed when they align their mandates with the realities of their member states' challenges. So I'm wondering what kind of reforms you think ECOWAS should, that ECOWAS need to make it stronger and more responsive to member states' concerns, so as to deter other states that might be nursing this idea of destabilizing the bloc.
Well, we can simplify it as saying building trust. What do I mean by building trust? You can't create a layer in which it makes head of state to go away with anything that they do in their countries, and then you come for your trade union meetings of head of state, like the ordinary session that they do, they just head. I don't talk true to yourself. What do I mean? Things were happening in Senegal. ECOWAS was writing some press releases that are not even what the paper on which they were written, not really frontally addressing issues. Those are issues that affected the way citizens perceive ECOWAS in these countries, because in their critical moment of challenges, they've not seen ECOWAS rising up to the occasion. You can see the press statement that was coming from the United States of America, how punchy it is, just saying authorities should conduct statements that do not inspire trust and hope in the people. So ECOWAS need to rise above board in the sense that they are able to talk true to themselves and not pander the truth by hiding behind a finger. That is what happened in some of these countries, and the reason why citizens lost trust in ECOWAS. So the number one thing that I think ECOWAS need to do is to project an institution that is not able to back but can bite, and that can speak true to one another at the level of the executive engagement. That is critically missing. And that is the reason why a lot of people feel maybe it's just a paper with a regional organization. But in other areas, aside political, I must tell you, ECOWAS has fared relatively well, particularly in the area of integration, particularly in the area of free movement of people. And when you look at the memo that they released yesterday, they were still talking about things that they want to do, even though in terms of critical investment in infrastructure, they might have not really gone far as we want to see. So these are the kind of reform, because the critical reform that you need to do is not really hard power, projecting that you are strong and all those things. Focus on the soft issues of economies, of everyday life that impart on the quality of lives of the people. I think those are very critical. And if you can buy the trust of the people, whether Francophone or Anglophone, ECOWAS will have been able to do something. And in the areas that this has been critically challenged are these issues that I mentioned now. The ECOWAS was completely missing during the crisis in Senegal. I can say that as somebody that resided here, and the citizens didn't take that lightly at all. These are areas that I think ECOWAS, and that is the reason why a lot of people have been talking about, not ECOWAS of presidents, but ECOWAS of the people of West Africa.
And that's a fine place to leave the conversation. Our time is up. We must thank you, Regional Coordinator, Institute for Security Studies, Dakar, Senegal, Dr. Oluwole Ojewale, for your time on the program. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. Now join us after the break as we discuss the significant milestone recorded in the fight against insecurity in Nigeria. Stay with us.